So what do we learn from this episode?
CEDH is the last remaining way to play Magic that isn't shaken up with every set.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Playing with Power podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things CEDH, EDH, and Magic the Gathering. I am your host, Ryan.
And I am your host, Callahan. And today we are going to be taking a look back on the final few sets of 2022. Dominaria United, Unfinity, Warhammer 40k, and Brothers War from a CEDH perspective. What cards performed? What cards disappointed? Did any cards for CEDH even come out of these sets at all? But first, we've got to talk about our sponsors. Today, they are TCG Player, Dragon Shield, Patreon, and our very own merch. If you're looking to get cards and you're not going to your local game store, give TCG Player a try for the best prices on the internet. You will just still be shopping at plenty of local game stores. They're just all online in a big marketplace for you. When you receive those cards in the mail, make sure you protect them with Dragon Shield accessories, just like Playing with Power does with our very own personal collections. Dragon Shield is the best in the business when it comes to protecting your collection, so make sure to give that stuff a try as well. After that, take those nicely protected, newly purchased cards for a spin during our webcam leagues and play days with our team over on Patreon. You'll get all kinds of other benefits for your direct support as well. Finally, consider picking up merchandise from our store. We have dice, coins, tokens, sleeves, and playmats. Any purchase helps support the podcast and the rest of the channel directly. We appreciate it a lot. Check out the podcast description for links to everything mentioned today.
And in every episode of the podcast, we do a specific Patreon shout out. And today's Patreon shout out goes to Peter Mangus. Peter, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter. I saw that you've been giving us money. $2 at a time for a long time.
We appreciate that
a lot.
Yes,
thank you. It all adds up and it all counts. But moving on to our main topic. This is the set retrospective, something we like to call a set retrospective. We've been doing them a few times now, but what is a set retrospective? Pretty much we look back on a certain amount of sets, this time the entire quarter 4 of 2022, and we look at cards that people were hyped on, or maybe cards that people missed too. We try to look out for those, and we each give our personal ratings of do we think the card was overhyped? Do we think the card was underhyped? Or do we think people were about right, spot on? We kind of call it even. Was the hype the right amount? Was the hype even? So we'll give our personal rankings of overhyped, underhyped, or even. And then we'll do that for quite a few different cards today. We're going to try to keep it moving, but we've got a lot of cards to talk about, a lot of overhyped cards to talk about.
Yeah, so why don't we do an individual set anymore? Because there's too many, first of all. And quite frankly, there's just not a lot of CEDH cards that comes out of every set. And we're just getting a huge drinking from the fire hose kind of situation with how many sets always come out. And you could get sometimes up to 1, up to 2, yeah. And there's just not a lot, you know?
I would be shocked if there was like more than 5 cards from a set that saw play in any CEDH decks anywhere in recent times, right?
Other than like maybe some crazy set like Modern Horizons too.
Yeah,
like,
Commander Legends.
Yeah, Commander Legends. Yeah. Like something that's like really, really geared towards, Commander or something like that. Yeah.
Yep. So first up, we have the very first set of quarter 4, which was Dominaria United and Dominaria United Commander. In the case where a set has a commander set, we just lump it all together. It's a little bit easier that way, easier to keep track of. And the first card we're talking about from Dominaria United is actually from Dominaria United Commander, and that is Activated Sleeper. It is a 2 generic and a black Phyrexian shapeshifter creature with flash, and you may have Activated Sleeper enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature card in a graveyard that was put there from the battlefield this turn, except it's a Phyrexian in addition to its other types. And as many shapeshifters are, it just starts out as a 0/0 before it transforms into something else. This card, I personally have it rated as an even. Obviously, this was a card that had a lot of hype coming out of preview season, and I think it was a lot of hype that was well-deserved. This card has been a great addition to Protein Hulks that happen to have Protein Hulk decks that happen to have black in their mana value, which is hopefully all of them. it just makes a lot of your piles a lot easier. It makes rotating out of disruption a lot easier. It kind of lets you double up on a lot of your payoff creatures and whatnot, should they end up in the graveyard or should somebody try to remove them. And it also lets you very easily assemble Grand Abolisher centered piles that you can then make another Protein Hulk and go again to go and get another pile and whatnot. So I rated this as an even. People saw it for what it was, and then it has executed its job as a Hulk payoff and enabler perfectly.
Yeah, was this a CEDH staple that made its way into every single black deck out there? Of course not. But I rated it an even as well. Basically, it's a really good piece for Protean Hulk lines, and it's doing its job out there in the wild right now, and it's doing really well. There's not really much else to say about this other than it was another piece for Protean Hulk, and it's doing work.
And what I love to see it in other stuff, yeah, it's a cool card. It's a cool clone. I'm sure people love to play it in casual EDH maybe, but as far as CDH goes, we're just copying Protein Hulks with it to go get our Grand Abolishers, and that's plenty good enough.
Yep.
Our next up card we have here is Chaotic Transformation. As you might be able to guess from the title, this is a polymorph effect. It costs 5 generic in a red. It is a sorcery. You can exile up to 1 target artifact, up to 1 target creature, up to 1 target enchantment, up to 1 target planeswalker, and or up to 1 target land. And then for each permanent exiled this way, its controller reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a card that shares a card type with it, puts that card onto the battlefield, then shuffles. Much the same as Activated Sleeper, I rated this as an even. A lot of people saw this, and this is kind of maybe the 5th or 6th best polymorph effect that we have at this point in time. There is one major teamer polymorph deck at this point in time, which is Thrasios Rograk. And I don't even know if Thrasios Rograk is playing Chaotic Transformations, but if they needed a 6th or 7th polymorph effect to turn Rograk into Hullbreaker Horror, then I'm sure this would fit the bill. But as far as I'm aware, nobody's really playing this one. It has a lot of theoretical upside to where you can change enchantments into other enchantments and artifacts into other artifacts. And planeswalkers into other planeswalkers, but I don't think we're doing that in CDH. I rated this an even. Maybe I even should have rated this as over, but
I rated it as over. 6 mana for a sorcery is too much. We already have 3 polymorph effects that we're using in the polymorph decks. They're the ones that will get you Hullbreaker Horror or Tidespout Tyrant, and you use something like Roger to put it onto the battlefield. But all the other ones that are being used, Polymorph itself, which is 4 mana for a sorcery, Divergent Transformations, which is 6 mana with Undaunted for an instant, so you can do it an instant, so it's also 4 mana for an instant. And then the third one, which is the Proteus Staff, and I believe it is 3 to activate.
It is 3 to activate. Yeah.
And so you put it on the battlefield, and then you activate it. I can't remember its mana value, unfortunately, right now. But so you have the ability to have it be repeatable. So 3 is probably about the sweet spot. I don't know if you'd want to dilute it any more than 3 polymorph effects in that deck. Because now all of a sudden you're just getting to a point where it's like, okay, now I have the 6 mana value Chaotic Transformations in my opening hand. I'm not winning this game. I'm so far gone. And I just don't think it needs it. And it's the worst. Like you said, it's like the 5th or 6th best one. And I just don't think it makes the cut. I think people just look at every polymorph effect and say, oh, good, another polymorph effect.
It's a polymorph effect. Yeah.
And you're like, well, it's one of the lesser, it's not as good as the other ones they've ever printed. So exactly. I think people are over on this personally.
And moving on to a mythic rare from Dominaria United, we have Sarah Paragon. It is a 2 generic white creature angel with flying and then a whole bunch of rules text. Once during each of your turns, you may play a land from your graveyard or cast a permanent spell with mana value 3 or less from the graveyard. If you do, it gains when this permanent is put into the graveyard from the battlefield. Exile it and you gain 2 life, and it is a 3/4. Right off the bat, I have this as overhyped. I think out of the gate, there was a lot of CEDH stacks players, white X stacks players who saw this card and were like, whoa, this is such a great value engine. And, I've played against it, and because, of course, I play games against Charles, the mono white guy, who, of course, this went into all of his decks. I have played games against this card, and it does put in work, but I don't think it puts in enough work. A lot of people are really hyped on this card, and I think it's fine. I think it kind of does what it needs to do. You can play a land out of the graveyard in your white deck. I don't know how a land ended up in your graveyard. Or you can replay your Drannith Magistrate that got killed once, or you can replay your Spirit of the Labyrinth, or, there are some good Hate Bear pieces out there that Serra Paragon lets you recycle. But paying 4 mana for a 3/4 flyer that lets you recast some stuff once a turn is pretty high bar in my opinion. So I've slapped this with the overhyped rating.
Yeah, if we had another ranking of double overhyped, I would give it to this. Like
over.
Yeah, it was overhyped. Like, what are people smoking? Like, how is this a CEDH card? I don't understand. Then the reason that I say that is because a lot of people had that exact scenario that you thought about when they were at least evaluating this card. Oh, well, I could get rid of somebody got rid of my Drannith Magistrate and I'm going to recast it. Haha, I'll get him. This Serra Paragon is so good. I'm like, the game's probably over. If they removed your Drannith Magistrate, they probably did it on the end step or during their turn to win the game right then and there. They're not just going to be like, oh, kill your Drannith Magistrate past the turn, guys. Like, that's not how it works. There's no real world where this is going to do what you think it's going to do unless so many other things have gone wrong that you're probably not really ahead in that game anyway. And Serra Paragon's just not really doing enough for when it lands. I'm going to pay 4 and then maybe pay 2 to get my Drannith Magistrate back. It's just not really doing what we want it to do. I'd rather have something like Savine's Reclamation, even in those stacks. So even if my Drannith was removed and everything got back around to me, I'd rather just have Savine's in that case. And Serra Paragon is just really not what I'm looking to do, even in stacks. I'd rather have something with an immediate impact, an immediate benefit that's going to get me where I need to go with something like Linvala, Keeper of Silence, or something like that. That's had immediate impact on the board that's really going to cause trouble for my opponents.
I certainly agree, Ryan, and I think this is a card that you put in your mono white decks. Like I said, Charles put it into his decks. I think it belongs there, especially because your game plan is usually so all in on being able to actually disrupt your opponents enough to stall the game enough such that you can kill them with your 3/4 flyer, right?
Sure.
And in that realm, if somebody's going to be removing your Drannith Magistrate, you're probably going to be losing the game. So maybe it's worth to recycle it. But I also agree with you. 4 mana is a lot in this format, and I will pretty much always want more from my 4 mana. Moving on from there, we have an entire cycle of cards, the Defiler cycle. I'm not going to sit here and read them all to you. I'm just going to read one of them to you and kind of explain how they all work. I have selected the blue one, Defiler of Dreams, which people were most hyped for CEDH. It is a 3 generic and double blue creature, Phyrexian Sphinx creature type, pretty spooky. It is a flying 4/3. And then it does something that all of the Defilers do. As an additional cost to cast blue permanent spells or other colors, depending on what Defiler it is, you may pay 2 life. Those spells cost a color, the relevant color, less to cast if you paid life this way. This effect reduces only the amount of blue mana you pay. And then whenever you cast a blue permanent spell, draw a card. So all of these spells basically give you the ability to pay 1 Phyrexian mana on all of the spells that you're casting. Now, note that it doesn't let you replace all of your colored mana costs the way that Crick does, for example. It just lets you do 1 per spell. That was a hang-up that a lot of people had, and I think was part of the reason that I rate this entire cycle as overhyped. A lot of people saw, oh, I could turn all of my mana costs into Phyrexian mana. No, that's not how it works. It gives you a little bit of a discount. And then all of them, much as the way of Defiler of Dreams lets you draw a card every time you cast a blue permanent, all of them have a different color relevant effect. when you cast a permanent matching their color identity, like Defiler of Vigor, which I think is incidentally the one that has seen the most play in decks like Yeva and Savala. Whenever you cast a green permanent spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. That can get out of hand pretty quick if you're playing a lot of creatures. The red one, whenever you cast a red permanent spell, Defiler of Instinct deals 1 damage to any target. That's a pretty good cute way to kill somebody with your infinite dockside loop, but also you should be killing somebody anyways through maybe a more efficient means if you already have an infinite dockside loop going on. So these things are cute. They're cool. I love drawing cards every time I cast a blue permanent, but all in all, they all cost 5 or 4, and they just don't get there for me. They're all overrated.
Yeah, I think they're all overrated as well. I think they're great and casual. I think it's a lot of fun. And I think part of it came from, like you said, the misunderstanding of how the card worked. Oh, everything is, Phyrexian now. Oh, let's go. No, that's not what this is. It's one of the pips in the casting cost. And it's also, you only get an effect whenever the spell you're casting is a permanent spell. Enchantment, creature, or whatever it might be. So it's not just any spell. So you're not going to, get somebody with grape shot effects or something like that, or you're going to faithless looting up to, into a whole bunch of storm turns with Defiler of Instinct. That's not how that works. It's permanent spells. And like you said, if you find someone that was like, oh, I could do a dockside loop and kill everyone with Defiler of Instinct. If you got a dockside loop, you don't need to kill everyone with Defiler of Instinct. You've got plenty of other routes to actually win you the game without having to jam this otherwise dead card into your deck. They're overcosted for CEDH. They're not overcosted for casual. They have really interesting effects. It's a really cool type of flavor to put into your regular commander decks. But for a CEDH perspective, it was definitely overhyped. They don't really have a spot that I've seen.
So true, Ryan. And moving on to a spell that I wanted to be so good, and it has disappointed. I'm spoiling it. Overhyped rating from me. Maybe even overhyped rating, as you alluded to earlier, Ryan. I have the single black cost, instant, cut down, destroy target creature with total power and toughness 5 or less. In theory, CDH decks are always wanting for more removal. We have wasted a lot of breath on this podcast and on Twitter, and even in some of our videos talking about how maybe people should be playing more removal in their CEDH decks. And I think that thought that people have about running more removal really motivated some people to really want to play this card and really have this card be good. And if you think about it, it does kill a lot of stuff in the format. It kills Malcolm. It kills Timna. It kills insert quite a few different hate bears. But what it doesn't do, it doesn't kill Winota. It doesn't kill Crom. It kills Thassa's Oracle. Oops, too late. That doesn't matter. It kills some of the smaller, it kills many of the smaller kind of value threats kind of in the format, but it doesn't kill anything that you're losing the game to, except for it's explicitly Malcolm. Like, you can take out a Malcolm with a cut down and not die to the Glinthorn Buccaneer, which doesn't die to cut down because it's a 2/4 for a total combined power and toughness of 6. So I think a lot of people were hyped on this one. Understandably, people should be playing more removal. We've talked about this. But this one just barely didn't make the cut. And I know even some of the most hyped people, I've been seeing them quietly removing it from their lists over the last month or so.
I really wanted this to be a card. Premium comes at, removal comes at such a premium. And 1 mana value instant removal. Wow, how great is that? You can't get much better other than like paying life or cast something without paying its mana cost or something. Like that's the only way it gets better. But 1 mana value instant. Oh, it's so good. But it's just that clause where it's power and toughness 5 or less, because we really want our removal to not be situational. We want it for any circumstance, and we can't have it in a circumstance where somebody brings that wild card creature out and you're like, this is really hosing me. I don't really know what to do, and all I have is a cut down in my hand. I'm screwed. I would rather have had any other removal spell for this. And I think it was the mana value that people wanted to make this card work, and unfortunately it didn't. It still has a spot in some decks. People did give it a fair shake, and unfortunately it did end up being overhyped. I would even go a little bit more and to say that I would just leave it at overhyped. I was going to say even, but it really wasn't even. It's overhyped, unfortunately, and I'm very sad that it's overhyped. Let me be clear here.
Moving on to another card from Dominaria United, we have Plaza of Heroes. This is a land. It taps for colorless mana. It can tap for 1 mana of any color that can only be spent on casting legendary spells. It can tap for 1 mana of any color among legendary permanents you control, or you can pay 3, tap it, and exile Plaza of Heroes to give target legendary creature hexproof and indestructible until the end of the turn. A little inside baseball here. On the sheet for this podcast, I have written in all caps, over, over, over. So maybe we've ascended upon over, and we have reached over.
A slight breach in etiquette when we would go for the triple over and went right for the jugular at quadruple over,
Yes, exactly. So I cannot think of a CEDH card in recent memory that has received more hype on Twitter and on r/CEDH and whatnot, and basically have seen no results. I have not seen this in a CEDH list. I would bet that if people tried to put it in a CEDH list, they quickly removed it. You need lands that tap to cast your spells, and in so many CEDH decks, only being able to add the mana of a color among legendary permanents you control is actually a pretty big ask. You might not control your commander on turn 1 or 2 and need an extra red to cast a double red spell. You might only have Timna out and really want that blue and red from Crom in order to cast, counter spells? Pyroblast? You might only have Crom out, and oops, you really needed white for that Swords to Plowshares. Dang, this stinks. Plaza of Heroes, terrible land. I haven't even seen people putting this into their casual EDH decks, and this is like what just reads like a prototypical made for Commander card, and I have not seen anyone playing it anywhere. I've heard nobody being happy with it if they've put it in their deck. Overhyped ranking from Callahan Jones on Plaza of Heroes.
And I agree 100%. We could see why some people might have seen the potential in a card like this. You're like, well, we have Mox Amber, and that card's amazing, and we totally run it in our decks. And this has kind of a Mox Amber effect. And we're like, nah, Mox Amber is not this. And just like you said, because Mox Amber can cast a Pyroblast if you have Roger on the battlefield. This doesn't do that. And basically you get so hyper focused on what the ceiling is that you forget what the floor is that it's a colorless land, and you have to try and get your commander onto the battlefield before you can really start to utilize things. I would rather have a Cavern of Souls for something like this. If to cast my commander, cast a legendary spell. Okay. I'd rather have that for that. And it gives the added benefit of it being uncounterable. I have rainbow lands for this. I have shocks and duels and all this stuff. I don't need another one of these. This doesn't do what we want it to do. And it makes things so clunky in trying to accomplish them that people aren't running them in CDH. And just like you said, people in casual Commander are being like, okay, maybe this wasn't as good as we thought it was going to be. And they slowly slide it out of their deck because people were absolutely overhyped on this. It was unbelievable how overhyped they were.
That is so true, Ryan. Bad card. Don't put it in your deck. Next up, we have reached an entire new set, and that is Unfinity, the unset, the joke set that just so happened to have quite a few cards with eternal legality, and therefore many of the cards in the set were on the table for CEDH. We have a whole 2 written down here, Ryan. And I'm sure if you kept up with discussion around CEDH, you know what they both are. The first one is Blank Goblin. It is 2 colorless in a red. It is the creature type Goblin Guest. Love to have a guest in Magic the Gathering. And when this creature enters the battlefield, you may put a name sticker on it. Add a red for each unique vowel on that sticker. And of important note for the consideration of this card, the vowels are A, E, I, O, U, and Y. I've never, I know that Y is usually treated as a vowel. I know it's not technically a vowel. Interesting choice for them here, Ryan. Interesting strategy just to make this card better. I wrote this card down as underhyped. I know people talked about it. I know people were understandably reticent about putting it into their CEDH decks because the sticker mechanic is weird. Uncards are strange. A lot of people don't really like the way they mesh with how they historically view Magic. And I would say understandably so. But I would say this card is underhyped because how this I'm not going to go to the mechanics of how the sticker deck works, but you have a very random chance of getting between the floor. You get 4 red mana is the absolute least you can get when you cast this card. And the ceiling is, I believe, 6
it's
or
5.
7 red.
It's all
okay,
5.
Okay,
because
it's
it's the
3 to
each
5
individual
okay.
instance, so it's 5.
Okay, gotcha. That maximum. See, look, I'm so good at letters and words. So this gets you, depending on what sticker sheet
I'm sorry.
I'm
sorry, it's 6. What am I thinking? Why? God,
why
I'm
is
such an idiot. I'm sorry.
Why is a vowel, Ryan?
You literally just said it too, and I was just like,
oh, there's 5 vowels.
There's 6. The ceiling is 6. Yeah.
The ceiling is 6. Yes. So you can get between 4 and 6 red mana out of blank goblins. So at floor, you are going up 1 red mana, and at ceiling, this is a better Seething Song. The band in Legacy and Modern, because it's so good, ritual Seething Song. This is better than Seething Song, depending on what sticker sheet you pull and yada yada. We're not going to go into that. I put this card as underhyped. People didn't want to think about it. People were confused about how it worked. We're obviously confused about how it works. But it turns out this card is a great ritual if you're willing to put it into your deck. Take us away, Ryan.
I hope there's enough recording space. All right, so let's just evaluate it from a purely mechanical perspective. I think this card was underhyped. I think this card is, from a mechanics perspective, amazing. So a creature that allows you to net mana is usually it's always what it is. It's always netting mana. The way that the little attractions / sticker sheets / whatever works is you get 10, you reveal 3 at random because you have to shuffle the little 10 card deck, and then you get to choose from those stickers for that game. And you basically build your little mini deck to make sure that there is these particular stickers on it. And they're the ones that do break parity every time. So you're right. The absolute floor is like a 4, and the ceiling is 6. I mean, breaks parity every time you cast it. That's an amazing effect. And for only 3, by the way. We have ritual effects, like you said, like Seething Song, that we run all the time in a lot of CEDH decks that want this type of effect. So from a purely mechanical standpoint, it's an amazing card. People were definitely underhyped on it. Now, from a not purely mechanical standpoint, this is the camp that I am in. I never liked the unsets. They're fun, they're wacky, they're goofy. That's great. I more power to everyone who loves the unsets. I have no problem with people who like unsets. That's fun. I don't want them in my CEDH games or my legacy games where people are like pulling out attractions and sticker sheets and doing all that kind of stuff. That's all good and fine to do those goofy mechanics and unsets where it's kind of isolated to that environment. But now, in order to push these unsets, they made them legal eternal because unsets just don't sell. And so they're like, why put all the time into it if they don't sell? I've got it. Let's make them legal eternal format legal. And it's just like, no, what have you done? And so now people are running around with sticker sheets and stuff like that, dealing with all the logistics that goes into something like that. And it's a fuss. It's a fuss I don't want to have to deal with. I'm currently, I play mono red decks. This card is good. I'm currently holding out for lack of a better word. My boomer brain is holding out as long as possible because I don't want to deal with attractions and sticker sheets and doing all that I don't like doing all that extra stuff. This side kind of, things I have to keep track of. I don't like that. That's why I don't like the day and night mechanics. That's why I'm not a huge fan of dungeons. I mean, I get why people like those things, but in my CEDH game, I don't want to have to keep track of all that additional stuff on top of everything else I already have to keep track of in a 4-player game to begin with. This should have been relegated to just the unsets, and everyone should have had a great time playing them. But having them in these games now where we have these attractions, it's very irritating because it's so much extra to try and keep track of all the time. That's my rant. I'll stop now.
Now that the rant is over,
mm-hmm.
I'll move on to Saw in Half, the other card we have here from Unfinity, Ryan. It is one of the first cards they revealed from Unfinity, and so we had plenty of time to talk about it after the set was delayed for like 4 months. It is a black instant. It'll run you 2 generic and a single black mana. It says, destroy target creature. If that creature dies this way, its controller creates 2 tokens that are copies of that creature, except their base power is half that creature's power, and their base toughness is half that creature's toughness. Round up each time. So, while this card says destroy target creature on it, what it pretty much is a creature doubler for yourself. And understandably, a lot of people were really excited about this card because there's this little tiny card you may have heard of at CEDH called Dockside Extortionist that a lot of people really like to play. A lot of people thought about all these hyper awesome loops they could do with Dockside Extortionist, blah, big braining everything. And there's plenty of other stuff that you might want to double and whatnot. But at long last, once this card came out, once I saw what people were doing with it, I can still solidly put this in the overhyped tier, Ryan. I am overhyping Saw in Half, but I think this is one of the few cards we've kind of talked about today where I'm saying it's overhyped, but it's still like a good card. It's just not the all-inclusive must-play that a lot of people are hyping it up to be. It is great in certain decks that like could use the extra help with Dockside. It's great in mono black Yawgmoth, for example, because it can be you can make a copy of your persist creature, and then you have 2 persist creatures, which lets you just go off while only having 1 persist creature, because there's only like 5 or 6 black persist creatures. So the amount of persist creatures you have are quite low. So Saw in Half effectively ups your count. So it's used in that way. It's used in specific decks for specific things, but it hasn't become an all-inclusive must-play staple in every black deck. So in that regard, it's automatically an overrated for me.
So, yeah, and I pretty much agree. I think this was overrated. I think that we had a lot of time to brew with this, and a lot of time to kind of speculate on it. And this actually is an infinite combo with Dualcaster Mage. So immediately people were like, oh, we can go infinite with Dualcaster Mage. Let's go. This is amazing. And we'll have, instead of just Dualcaster Twin Flame, we've got Dualcaster Saw in Half. And it's an instant. And the problem with Saw in Half and Dualcaster Mage is those tokens don't gain haste. So unfortunately, it became a very specific circumstance in which you could actually do the Saw in Half Dualcaster combo. You had to specifically do it on an end step, right before your turn or something like that, because they stick around, they don't get sacrificed or anything. They're not destroyed, but they don't have haste. And so a lot of times when you're revealing an ad nauseum pile and you're going to reveal Saw in Half and then you reveal your Dualcaster Mage, well, guess what? That's not a combo that's going to work. So that already made it clunky. And they're like, oh, I'm going to try and get extra value out of my Dockside. Dockside's enough value on its own. You don't need to extrapolate more value by sacrificing a card out of your Dockside. You could just do things that help you win the game, not just help you get extra treasures. That's just not what you really want to be doing. And so Saw in Half fell into this weird place where it's like, yeah, I guess I could kill an undying creature or whatever, and that undying creature come back if it didn't have a counter on it, or kill something and get 2 out of them. Oh, that's so cool, that's so great. But it's like, that's really just not what we want to be doing in CEDH. We just don't want to be making 2 of something. We already have 1 of something, and that 1 of something's usually powerful enough on its own to get the job done. So sacrificing a card just to make 2 of something that's already there just was a little too clunky for what we wanted. It didn't do the Dualcaster thing, so it couldn't go infinite. and it just ended up falling off the board, and it just ended up being overhyped, which is unfortunate. I really like this card, actually.
I think it's a slick card. It's a very cool design, and I think it does a little bit to what you were talking about earlier. I think it does kind of hit the right in between mark, where it feels like a normal Magic the Gathering card, but it also is kind of like a silly, goofy concept that would maybe only actually be in an unset. And so it just kind of works on both planes, you know?
Yeah, I agree. If it was just basically named anything else, it would be just a regular Magic card.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
It just didn't have to be called Saw in Half. It could have just
didn't have a guy with a big
big saw in his hand and stuff, and crazy. Yeah, exactly.
I don't know, it could be a Rakdos card.
Exactly.
Put that Ravnica, name it Saw in Half. You know,
yeah.
People just Anyway,
exactly. So all goofiness and stuff like that aside, which I ranted about earlier, it's a decent card. Just doesn't quite get there, unfortunately.
Now with Dominaria United and Unfinity out of the way, we're going to take a quick ad break, and then we'll be right back. Thanks for sticking with us. And we are back for our quarter 4 set retrospective for good old 2022, talking about CEDH cards found within the sets of quarter 4. And we're just going to jump right into the next one. That is Warhammer 40K. There's a lot we could be said about Warhammer 40K, but I'm just going to jump right into the cards. First up, we have Chaos Mutation. This is another polymorph effect. I'll read it to you right now. It costs 3, a blue, and a red. It is an instant. Exile any number of target creatures controlled by different players. For each creature exiled this way, its controller reveal cards from the top of their library until they revealed a creature card, puts that card onto the battlefield, then put the rest of the bottom of their library in a random order. And I will admit to you, Ryan, I think this is maybe the first card that I have just enthusiastically said that I think was a little underhyped. Obviously, we talked about polymorph effects earlier on in this episode. It's a 5 CMC 1, but it's an instant. It is 2 colors instead of just being red or just being blue or what have you. But it does have some upside. It is some a little bit of just personal experience here. But I have played in a game against a polymorph deck where they cast Chaos Mutation, removing their Rograk and an opponent's Eidolon of Rhetoric. So they polymorphed away their opponent's Eidolon of Rhetoric to take away the Rule of Law effect that was locking them in the game, out of the game, and they removed their Rograk to go and get their Hullbreaker Roar. That's cute. That's just kind of fun, right? And that is kind of the little upside that this card has. If you need to, you can polymorph away somebody's Glinthorn Buccaneer when they're trying to win. You can polymorph away. Glinthorn Buccaneer is the only creature that really wins games, so I really just keep going back to that one whenever we talk about removal, Ryan. But I personally view this as a very interesting and very flexible polymorph. What it loses in not being a 4 CMC instant, it makes up with a little bit of flexibility, and it wasn't really all that hyped. And I have seen it in more than a few Rograk Thrasios decks that I've played against, so I marked this as under, in my opinion.
I would probably call this a little bit more uneven. So there's a couple of things that I do like about it. Number one, it's an instant, so that's great. It's 5 mana and it is 2 pips, so I'm not a fan of that. So you're already facing an uphill battle with Chaos Mutation. There's a couple of things that I do like about it. It's exile any number of target creatures controlled by different players. So you can exile up to 4 creatures with this particular spell, 1 for each player. And they are exiled, so they're not destroyed, so they don't go to the graveyard. So they're exiled, and they're not put onto the bottom either, so they can't get them back. So they are exiled, they are gone. So that's actually really great. So in case somebody decided to, play the shenanigans with a Sarah Paragon earlier and try to get their Drannith Magistrate back, they can't with Chaos Mutation. And so is it worth it to hold up 5 mana to stop a Glinthorn Buccaneer? Probably not. But is it... like you said, maybe, get rid of a Drannith Magistrate or get rid of a Rule of Law type effect to go off and win. And you can have it across multiple. So you're like, oh, someone's got a stacks piece, someone's got a stacks piece over here. I can get both of them and go for the win. That's neat. It's a little bit edge case, in my opinion. That situation presenting itself where you have 3 different things stopping you. Okay, well, you could also just not roll you could not get lucky in rolling the dice and they could reveal a different one. But overall, I'd say it's about even. I think it's a neat effect. If you're looking for another polymorph effect, this would be fourth on my list because of the extra flexibility and things it does. But I don't know if it quite makes the cut, and I'm not sure if they're going to still run it or not. I'm not a polymorph expert by any means, but overall, I'm even on it.
It is pretty hard to beat polymorph itself, reality scramble, transmogrify, and divergent transformations. That's already a pretty good suite of polymorph effects they have. So if you're gonna pick up another one, it's got to be good.
Yeah, it has to be good. I agree.
And the next two cards on our Warhammer 40k list are both commanders. Let's go. We finally have some commanders on the list. First up is Abaddon the Despoiler. This one will run you 2 generic, a blue, a black, and a red. Grixis. We love Grixis. It is an Asterities warrior. Sorry, I'm not a Warhammer expert. It has trample, and during your turn, spells you cast from your hand with mana value X or less have Cascade, where X is the total amount of life your opponents have lost this turn, and it is a 5/5. Right off the bat, I have this rated as underhyped, mainly because I think this commander has a lot of potential that has not yet been realized as a CEDH commander. Giving your spells Cascade is a very powerful effect. And I know a lot of people would turn to me and they'd say, well, Callahan, why would you play Abaddon in your command zone over Yidris? He is Grixis, but he also has green. That's a great question. Number one, Abaddon is much easier to cast. Jeweled Lotus helps you cast Abaddon. Jeweled Lotus does not help you cast Yidris. Abaddon does not have to connect for your stuff to have Cascade. You can make your opponents lose life in plenty of other ways that aren't combat. And if you need to go into the red zone, Abaddon does actually have an extra point of toughness. He's a 5/5 instead of a 5/4. They both have trample, so it is a little bit easier for you to get through in combat if you need to do that to start the Cascade pain train with Abaddon. And I know that you might also think, well, he puts a limit on what stuff has Cascade. I mean, if you're casting stuff that's higher than 3 CMC in your Grixis CEDH deck, I would be surprised. I don't know what you're casting. I don't know what you're casting that costs more than 3, but let me know. Adnaz costs 5, I guess. But so I think this is an underutilized commander that has a lot of really cool potential and was not very hyped upon release. So I'm just smacking an under on it. I'm excited. I'm still excited to see what people are working on with this one because I know people are working on stuff. They're just not very public with it yet, so stay tuned for that one.
Ooh, hush hush. Okay, so I'm going to rate this as under simply because nobody talked about this card. Like, it completely flew under every radar that there was to even pick up on this card. No one's talking about this card. And this is strictly better Yidris. From a CEDH perspective, you're in Grixis, so automatically your floor is pretty high. Like, just by itself. You're just in Grixis. So it doesn't rely on the commander in order to win the game. You do lose card advantage in the command zone. And there is a little bit of startup that you have to do once you cast this card. But the advantages you get out of this card is actually pretty amazing. So comparing all the things you said to Yidris, Yidris has to take a turn around the table before it can attack unless you have some sort of haste enabler, which requires additional setup. It has to be able to connect, and it has the trample, but sometimes it'll die. Everyone knows to just kill Yidris on sight. Simple as that. But with Abaddon, you can do something that can give you value the moment that you have it on the battlefield. You don't have to wait for turn rotations. You don't have to connect with somebody. You could just start doing things that allow you to start getting benefits of that cascade immediately. Now, this is the total amount of life your opponents have lost this turn. So if you have a spell that did 2 damage to each opponent, all your cards of mana value 6 or less are now cascading. So just 2 damage to each opponent is enough. Cast Pyroclasm. Guess what? You can now cast your Ad Nauseam and it has Cascade. Things like that. It's a total amount of life your opponents have lost this turn, which is very powerful. Cast something that just does 1 to each opponent. It's already 3 or less. It's so easy to hit this floor. And there's so much potential of it. But we just got fed from the fire hose so quickly during this set during when this set came out, and so many unique cards came out of it that we just didn't have time to digest it before we were on to the next thing. Like Warhammer was like a week, and then we were on to whatever the next thing was. We just had no time to actually absorb it. And this was definitely an overlooked commander. I definitely give it an under.
Next up, we have the other commander that I alluded to a second ago. That is Marneus Calgar. It is an Esper commander. It'll run you 2 colorless, a white, a blue, and a black. It has double strike. It is a 3/5, and whenever 1 or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. And then you can pay 6 and create 2 white Asteres warrior creature tokens with vigilance. People had a lot of big dreams for this card. I think in some ways they've succeeded. I think it makes an interesting Esper deck that maybe there hasn't been some great Esper commanders in a while. There's not a great there is a great Esper deck now. People have finally come around on Malcolm Timna, so I don't want to get ahead of myself there.
Excuse me, Tivit says hello.
Tivit, look. Yeah, Tivit, Malcolm Timna. People are finally coming around on Esper, but I think a lot of people are looking at Marneus Calgar like, ooh, maybe we can make a cool Esper deck out of this. And it is interesting because this is an Esper command zone enabler. It gives you an infinite way to draw your deck from the command zone if you have infinite mana, because you can pay 6, make 2 creature tokens. When a token enters the battlefield under your control, you draw a card, and you just do that over and over again with your infinite mana until you have drawn your entire deck. Ooh, now I can play my Thoracle, whatever. And that's interesting. But and it's a cool deck. I've seen people do cool stuff with it. There was a Mox Masters January entrant that we had on stream that did some really cool stuff. But overall, I think I'm rating this one as over. This is the one that people kind of had marked as the CEDH commander from the crew, from all of the Warhammer 40K ones, and I just haven't seen those kind of results from it. So I think it's an overrated card, but a soft overrated card.
I'm gonna rate it as even, simply because we have seen it perform in tournaments and stuff like that. Is it an overperformer in tournaments? I would say it's an overperformer for what it is assumed to be, because a lot of people aren't really, some people thought it was good, then it kind of petered out, and it actually is performing. So that's nice. But also at the same time, yes, creating the tokens is neat and stuff like that, and it is an infinite mana sink in the command zone, which is great. But the thing that makes it even versus over for me is the fact is that first line of text that says whenever 1 or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. That's 1 or more tokens. That's not creature tokens. That's not, a very specific type of token. It's any token that you create. So if you do a phantasmal image on somebody's dock side, you create treasure tokens, you get to draw a card because you created a treasure token. And there's just a lot of other different things you can do in regards to tokens in Esper that gives you a lot of ability to draw those cards that you want to do to keep kind of going. So Marneus Calgar, I think, is more even than anything else. I don't think it's overhyped, but I also think that it's putting enough numbers in to not be underhyped, in my opinion.
I did forget for a second here. This is the one commander that's finally been able to put Smothering Tithe to a truly effective use.
That's pretty good, isn't it?
Somebody draws a card, you draw a card, and make a treasure.
And make a treasure. So good. So good.
The last card on our list from Warhammer 40K. Honorable mention, Sloppity Bile Piper, best demonic consultation name of 2022. In a year that was ripe with demonic consultation names, the most dangerous gamer. You are already dead. That came out in 2022. That's crazy.
Yeah. But Sloppity Bile Piper easily takes the cake for me.
He takes the cake there. Moving beyond Warhammer 40K, we're moving to the last set of Q4 of 2022, and that is the Brothers' War. The epic tale of the war between Urza and Mishra finally came into the 2000s. We finally
to the 21st century.
Yeah, we finally got Urza and Mishra in the 21st century. I know somebody's going to BTFO me. Well, actually, the last Odyssey, the last one came out in 2001.
Did you know the Vanguard sets were in 2001?
Okay, I was 4 years old, so write that down. I was a child. I was a wee babe at that point in time. But we're just going to jump right into it. The first card that I have here is Calamity's Wake. It is an instant. It will run you a generic and a white. And it reads, exile all graveyards. Players can't cast non-creature spells this turn. Exile Calamity's Wake. This is, of course, a functional silence effect. It's not technically a silence effect, but most of the time when you're silencing your opponents, you are trying to keep them from casting non-creature spells this turn. So it's a silent effect. It also happens to exile all the graveyards. And it keeps you from also not being able to cast non-creature spells for the rest of the turn, which is a little sussy to me. So it can't be, this cannot be a protective spell, pretty much. This is a purely reactive silence. You're not really going to be able to silence your opponents and go off the way that many people use Grand Abolisher or the titular silence card. And because of all that, I saw a lot of hype for this card, but I'm just slapping it with the overrated. This card's fine. If you're really in the market and are so desperate to silence your opponents defensively or exile their graveyards to stop them from breaching or whatever, go off. But I don't think this one's worth the inclusion in my deck.
This is almost a double over for me. People were really high on this card. They were like, wow, what an amazing effect. We have a second Ranger Captain of Eos. Oh, this will go really good in my creature-based combo decks like Rocco and stuff. No. Every single time it's been an underperformer or a dead card in your hand because there is no situation except for extremely, extremely narrow ones where you and your opponents wouldn't want to cast non-creature spells this turn. You only want your opponents to be locked out. Silence, Ranger Captain of Eos, those spells do that thing while still allowing you the flexibility to cast whatever spells you need to cast in order to win the game. This does not do that. This is a very overhyped card. Everyone I've ever seen that was really high on it removed it from their decks. They said, this was not good. I did not like this card. It did not perform.
Sure seems to be a lot of that going around on this episode of the Playing with Power podcast, Ryan. Up next, we have a card that the community, I think, is still very split on, and we may even be split on. That is Myrel, Shield of Argiv. This is a 3 generic and a white legendary creature human soldier. Oh, it's a human. You could cheat it in a play with Winota. I've heard that. During your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. So once again, this is a pseudo silence effect. Even better, it's pretty much a Grand Abolisher effect.
It is Grand Abolisher.
It's Grand Abolisher. So when this is out on the battlefield, people are not going to be messing with you on your turn. And then whenever Myrel, Shield of Argiv attacks, you create X 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens, where X is the number of soldiers you control. She, of course, herself is a soldier. You would also be surprised how many other human soldiers are out there in the world that will incidentally pump up with this effect. And when this card was released, people were, again, really high on this card. People were excited to see another Grand Abolisher, because Grand Abolisher is just straight up one of the best creatures in the format. People were excited to see that this was a human, so it could be cheated into play with Winota. How exciting. They were excited to see that it made non-human soldier creature tokens, which would also give you additional Winota triggers. Mm-hmm. And people playing white decks were also thinking that this card would, maybe just help you up your clock, get a faster kill on people, because much like we've all seen how quickly Najila gets out of hand with how many warrior tokens she can create. Myrel does pretty much the exact same thing, but with soldier tokens, right? But I personally am slapping this one with an overrated. Number one, hard to meet the amount of hype that this card had. Number two, I'm already seeing Winota players cut it from their decks. 4 mana is a lot to ask for, and there's just so many good creatures out there at this point for Winota. I've seen Mike and Ian talking about how if you're making any cut, you're cutting just a card that's incredible at this point. So every single card has to be really good. And whenever Myrel attacks, it creates those soldier tokens that are artifacts, which will pump up your opponent's dockside count. Don't exactly love that little detail either. Overall, I am personally rating Myrel as an overrated card. It was overhyped.
This one was really hard for me because when I first saw this, the first thing I saw was the mana value, and it was 4. And I was like, Grand Abolishers 2, this is literally double that, and I don't get double the effect. I get the Grand Abolisher effect, which is amazing, but I really want that to be a 2 or less type effect. And then the attacking and stuff like that, I kind of ignored that because I didn't really know the applications that I'd want it to be under. And so I did. I reached out to Mike and, I looked at conversations from other people that were Winota pilots, and they were like, yeah, it's a human. We're going to try it out. We're going to test it out, kind of like you said. And then they just ended up saying, this just isn't really doing what we want it to do anymore. We were hoping that it would do better, but it didn't. This does have a home in some decks, but those decks are very few in number. Just like we talked about Activated Sleeper early on, where, Protean Hulk decks want to have that card. This Myrel is, a very hyper-specific type of deck that would want this. I didn't think this was going to be very good, but I think a lot of people did think it was going to be the next Grand Abolisher. We were going to see it flooding everywhere. And so for that, I think it was overhyped. But overall, I think for the decks that do want that, it was very 50-50. A quick example is Jetmir. Jetmir wants this. Jetmir loves this card, actually. Get more soldiers, pumps up the team, and everything just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Jetmir loves this card. But in Winota, kind of wanted it, but now is cutting it. So I agree with you. I think it's overhyped, but it still has a home in some decks.
And moving on to a card that I know we're split on, Ryan, that is Soul Partition, a card we talked about a little bit actually in our roundup of the entirety of 2022, because it was the one card that people seem to be playing from Brothers War. And that is Soul Partition. It is a colorless in a white. It is an instant. Exile target non-land permanent. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owners may play it. A spell cast by opponent this way costs 2 more to cast. I wrote overhyped. I don't know if people were hyped about this card. I did a little bit of research before this podcast, and I saw that people were like, yeah, this is a card we can play, I guess. I just still don't understand why people are putting this card into their CEDH decks. I think it's fine, but like Touch the Spirit Realm exists. You can flicker your own stuff with Touch the Spirit Realm, or you can O-ring somebody's thing with Touch the Spirit Realm. This, you can flicker your own thing if you pay the full mana cost to replay it, or you can exile somebody's thing and they can also replay it for a little bit more. I don't know. I think it's fine. It's just like much the same as a lot of the Dominaria United cards we talked about. It's just one of those cards where I'm like, I think this could do it, but I just want a little more out of my cards. Overhyped ?
So when we talked about Soul Partition back when we were doing kind of the year in review, it hadn't been out very long. And so we were like, oh yeah, there might be something here. And, Magic players are notorious for over-evaluating cards in a vacuum. And I agree with you. I actually don't think it's underhyped. I think it's overhyped. Like you said, Touch the Spirit Realm and things like that, it gives you what you want from this card in a better package, a better way. Touch the Spirit Realm has the channel effect, so you can dodge your counter magic. You can still activate it instant speed, just like you would with the Soul Partition's instant speed casting. And so if you're trying to dodge removal, it becomes a new instance with the flicker effect, or you can, it's not a dead card in your hand, so you can still cast it and have it be an O-ring for something. Soul Partitions, I want more from, like you said, from my spells. And unfortunately, this one just seems purely reactive. It's not proactive. It's not very versatile. It's like, okay, I'll exile somebody's stacks piece. Sure, maybe I'll get that. Well, if somebody else, stops me, that person just recasts it. So there was a real card disadvantage that happened here. I traded a real card. They get their card back. Like that's bad. That's not good. Protecting something of mine, Touch the Spirit Realm does it better. But that's, once again, just goes into evaluating, cards in a vacuum. It's very, very difficult to do. Touch the Spirit Realm. Nobody touched that card for like 8 months. They overlooked it and didn't think anything of it. It wasn't until somebody started playing it and seeing its value that other people actually caught on. So that card was a completely slept on. Soul Perdition, I think, was overhyped. I wish it wasn't. I think it's a really cool card, but unfortunately, it just didn't perform like I wanted it to.
And moving on to the final Brothers Ward card here. This one's a fast and easy one, I think. We've got Haywire Might, a singular generic cost artifact creature insect. It's a 1/1. When Haywire White dies, you get 2 life, and you can pay a green. So it has green color identity. You can pay a green and sacrifice Haywire Might. And if you do so, you get to exile target non-creature artifact or non-creature enchantment. This was spoiled. People said, hey, this looks like a role player. And man, it's been a role player. If you're a green deck that wants a little bit more of non-creature artifact or non-creature enchantment removal, all on a creature, which is a lot easier to tutor for green than a lot of other solutions, such as Naturalize or Nature's End or whatnot. Haywire Might is probably just the solution for you. My first even in a long time.
Yeah, I think it's even. It does exactly what you wanted to do. It has that kind of Hope of Girapur effect or something like that, where it just does the thing you want it to do. It's colorless, so it's super easy to cast. You gain 2 life, whatever, who cares? But you can also sacrifice it to, exile, not destroy, but exile a pesky, problem, enchantment, or artifact. And it does exactly what you want. Basically, anybody who ran Caustic Caterpillar in their decks now runs this. This is just strictly better Caustic Caterpillar. And so that card became obsolete because of it. But, it doesn't go in every single deck ever, of course. But anybody that was running a Caustic Caterpillar type effect or something like that wants this card. It's a good card. It's not the best card we've ever seen, but it performs. It does it does the work that we want it to do.
It does the job.
It does the job. So yeah, I'm even on it.
And that is it for Q4 2022. There's definitely some other Brothers War stuff we could have talked about, like Brotherhood End, Gix, Yawgmoth, Praetor, all that type of stuff. But we kind of just wanted to hit the highlights, especially for Brothers War, where there's so many cards we could have talked about. A lot of cards that people were hyped up for on that set. And secretly, they're not playing any of them. But
spoilers.
Did we miss some cards? Did you disagree with any of our card evaluations? Do you think about cards in this way? Do you think back about how hyped up you were about cards and how that hype ended up working out for you? Did this episode make you realize the truth that as a CEDH player, you do not need to be hyper invested looking at every single set that comes out because we are the last remaining eternal way to play the game that is not shook up every other set? I hope so. Make sure to give us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast aggregator. You'd be surprised how much it helps. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and more. All links are in the episode notes. That about wraps it up for this episode of the podcast. Tune in next time when we talk more about our favorite format in our favorite game, Magic the Gathering. Thanks so much for watching and listening, and we will see you next time.